Hi, this is Mark with Michigan Biochar. Today is Good Friday in 2013 and spring has sprung. Obviously everywhere but northern Michigan. So what I'm going to do is give you a few tips today on how to get ready for gardening using biochar and some of the different elements that are free if you can just find where they are. So here standing next to me is this winter's manure pile. There's plenty of it. The cows have been cooped up and they're ready to be let out in the paddocks, and so we have all this extra manure right here. Just a couple tips. Ouch, Grace. Just a couple tips for you. Manure makes great compost, but it also makes just a really good garden supplement. So the trick with manure is if you can find a neighbor that's raising chickens, cattle, any kind of livestock, see if they have any manure that's available. If you implement that on your garden, it will help you to bring up the nutrient value, it will help bring up the pH, and it will help you to bring up the actual composition of your soil. So manure definitely works to your advantage. Now, cow droppings that have been sitting out, they will quickly lose the nitrogen value. It'll just go up in the atmosphere. So a lot of times, even if you have aged manure, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and implement it in the soil. So even when you lose the nitrogen value, you're building up the soil's content. So either way, it's a win-win situation. Next, we'll go look at some free ashes I got from my neighbor as well. As we just showed you with manure, manure is just an absolute must for a garden if you have it available. And most gardeners do not realize how much manure is free. So do your homework, look for manure whenever you can, and that would be one great step towards building up your garden for this year. Another benefit is ashes. We all, probably 2/3 of America, is dealing with a long winter, and with that a lot of people burn wood, more so now than actually over the last 5 to 10 years as people become more frugal. Well, ashes, as you may recall from stories with your grandparents or with some neighbors that garden, ashes really are a key ingredient towards building up the amount of matter that's in your garden, as well as bringing up the pH. So ashes, whenever you can get them, from good, clean, non-contaminated wood, is a great addition to the garden. It really can jump-start it and really help you to have a really robust garden. But there's one trick. A lot of people have not really figured out the fact that too much ashes added to the garden will not only continue to drive your pH up so high that it takes it out of the range for most vegetables, but actually if you run it too high, it'll shut your garden down. So too much of a good thing really is not a good thing. So my neighbor here, they burn wood in this wood burner, and what I'd like to do is show you some of the ashes they have stored up that they're so kindly going to let me use this year in one of our gardens. What they do is they just put it inside this barrel, and you can see the quality of this. Now with all ashes, you're always going to have large particles, medium-sized particles, and very small ones, and then you've got the powder. When you're adding the ashes on, especially the powder can really cut off the oxygen to the ground. So what you want to do is sprinkle that gingerly and then implement it in. So spread the powdery stuff very wide, and the large chunks and the medium and small ones are just fine how they are. Don't worry about their sizes, because when you implement it in the ground, they will actually help to do a lot of the things the biochar does. They'll help absorb water, and they'll create an environment for microbes to live in, and it will also help to create some air pockets because a lot of people struggle with compaction. So what a great way of helping to break up your soil and add nutrients, add pH value, add some truly good. What a great way of adding a lot of diversity to your garden as far as adding oxygen, porosity, matter in the ground, and increasing your pH. So if you have any neighbors that burn wood, you may want to go ask them. You may find that they'll have piles of free ashes for you to use for this year's garden. So free manure, free ashes, you're 2/3 of the way there towards a very successful garden. One last thing, always keep your antenna up. During the winter months, when you're driving out and about, when you see smoke, there's usually a fire, and those are the people that have the wood burners. Keep a mental note as to where those people live so that you can remember to ask them and seek them out and ask them during the course of the winter months. Okay, next we're going to show you some of the non-standard organic options for building your soil for this year. Obviously, biochar is a key part of your gardening process over time as you implement a little bit in at a time each and every year. Biochar has all of the benefits we talked about on previous blogs and videos on Michigan Biochar, so you definitely want to catch up on those. But for a holistic approach, sometimes you may not have cow manure or chicken bedding or ashes and stuff like that available. So sometimes you have to mix in some other, I guess I should call them non-standard but very typical type of soil amendments. And even though each of these have their strengths and weaknesses, I like to add some of these in anyways, just because naturally in my soil anyways here in Michigan, we do not have a lot of good normal nutrients found in the good quality soils you find in other places. Part of that's because of the glaciers as they receded and everything basically became somewhat of a desolate land and very void of nutrients. So in addition to ashes or manure or even biochar, I like to add other minerals that you can get from other parts of the country that can really add the mineral content and a lot of the additional things that the critters in the ground are desperately in need of in your garden. One good example, and this is my favorite, I like to add azomite, which is mined generally in Utah, I believe. This has somewhere around 60 or 70 different minerals. Many of these minerals we cannot find here in Michigan or in most parts of the country. So what's the benefit of azomite? Well, as you're implementing this as recommended, you will find your vegetables are far healthier, far more nutritious, and the taste is off the charts. So experiment with that sometime. Do one part of your garden, maybe plant tomatoes. Plant one part without azomite and the other part with azomite, and it may really shock you as to the taste qualities you'll get as a result of all of these nutrients being added into the soil. So I apply azomite basically on an annual basis just to help supplement everything, to help make up for the things that ashes or manures or compost or obviously some of these other nutrients or amendments just can't seem to provide. Another common one people use is limestone. Limestone's good as far as being able to give your garden a really good punch, but it's good for a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years if you're lucky, but this stuff you just have to keep adding. And it does nothing really to bring up the soil content, so You may want to experiment with this if you really have to. If you have nothing else available, use this. Other than that, I highly recommend you putting whatever good soil amendments in addition to biochar, such as manures, compost, or ashes into your garden. Another one I use is rock phosphate. And all it really is phosphorus that is depleted in our soils out here. I've been very reluctant in years past to do a soil sample, but it's really important. Now, all it really costs is about $20. Go out into various parts of your garden area, take a sample, small sample, take it to your local cooperative. They'll do a comprehensive soil exam for probably $15 to $22. And when you get it back, ask them to show you where your deficiencies are. So you can either have them do it, or you can read the charts. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to really understand a soil sample when it comes back, because they make it so user-friendly. Normally you'll see it in like a bar chart, like the one I'll be showing you in one of the upcoming videos or one of the blogs. It'll show you graphically what you're short on. For me, we were short on phosphorus. So what do? Go down to the local co-op and I buy rock phosphate. I add that into the garden and it brings a balance. So what you need to do is have a holistic approach, because biochar by itself will not give you the kind of garden you're really looking for in and by itself. Just the same as just applying rock phosphate, or just azomite, or just manure, ashes, or compost. What you need to do is find a balanced approach, and you want to use that soil sample to be your starting point. It sounds intimidating, but believe me, once you do it, you'll never go back. Then all you have to do is just do a soil sample once every 2 years, maybe 3 years, and just add the soil amendments as necessary. And then of course, each year, keep adding a little bit more biochar in to help build your soil, help it to keep the pH up, and to provide an area for the organisms underground to be housed, and for all the other purposes we explain on Michigan Biochar's website. So that's it on the soil amendment side. We just got one more part to show you, and then you should have a pretty good idea of some of the odds and ends you can use for gardening for this spring. One last important part of gardening is how to use sawdust. This sawdust right here I got from a local sawmill. It cost me $20 per truckload, and I have 2 truckloads. What you want to be very careful about, I talk a lot about the nematodes and the protozoa and all the bacteria and fungi and stuff that's in the ground that needs the feed. Yeah, I know, this is the first one of the Good Friday, and here we are in all the snow. But you want to be real careful, because if you implement this in the ground, sawdust, it will lock up your nitrogen, and you'll wonder why you can't grow anything in your garden. So you don't want to do that. Here's what I do with this, however. When I plant all my plants, I take large amounts of this and I use it as mulch around the plants. Some plants are a little sensitive to that, so you'll want to do your homework. But for the most part, the best thing about this is that it holds moisture and it keeps the weeds from growing. Quite often, actually, for example, in the greenhouse, we'll put down cardboard and then put this sawdust on top of it. Or we'll put wood chips on top of it, like we have over in that pile. And so it's a great addition to the garden, and as it is making contact with the soil, it is slowly breaking down and adding important stuff, nutrients and carbon to the soil that it desperately needs, but it's getting fed at a very slow pace. So what a great tool. Water retention, It's great for keeping the weeds down or completely away, and it is just a slow feed for your garden, making it stronger every year